So that's one area where we can think about nice to haves. And perhaps the difficulty is creating the market for the nice to haves. When I say creating the market, I mean creating the marketplace. Certainly in Britain in the 19th century, the railways allowed London to grow because they could haul in produce from around the country, fresh produce. And hence you get the Covent Garden, which it's very nice. It's fruit, vegetables, flowers, and the Opera House. They're all Covent Garden. And then there's Billingsgate, which is the fish market on the Thames, and there's Smithfield, which is the beef market. And markets have always played a big role in economic development. And here's an aside which shocked me, which is that Kenya grows flowers for the English market. But the big European flower market is in Holland for obvious reasons, all those tulips. And also the airports, the Schiphol airport. So the Kenyan flowers, part of formerly the British Commonwealth, British Empire, ordinarily go to the Dutch flower market before going to England, so that they can get a price in competition with all the other people, all the other things. And across Europe, Mother's Day is at a different day across the whole of the year. You know, we don't all celebrate Mother's Day, otherwise it would be boom and bust for the florists. So markets are important, and one might say one of the goals and the nice to have is a marketplace for tech tools. For their development and distribution. So VS Code is a Microsoft project that's got a tech plugin. VS Code has its own marketplace for plugins. And LaTeX provided a marketplace for style file plugins. So now we've related it to something we can understand, which is the marketplace created by LaTeX. LaTeX created a style file marketplace. You may not like the marketplace, but at least we can use it as a sort of placeholder word. And we can ask, is there a similar marketplace for tech tools? I'm going to stop now.
Well, I've done my best to take notes, Jonathan. They're in the chat.
Excellent. We can compare the transcript with them when the transcript comes. I'm very grateful to you for that.
And I think there are two tools, CheckTech, CHKTEX, and LACHEK or ECK that are standard in TechLive, but I'm not near a machine where I could check that just now.
Are they command line tools, Nelson?
Yes. And I find that CheckTech has, in my view, too many false positives, so I don't use it as often, but I do use LA Check and recommend it to students. And I have my own tool, BibCheck, for bibliographies.
Is BibCheck available on TechLive?
It's not in TechLive. None of my bibliography tools are, but it's available from our website, Matthew/pub. And underneath that, you can find it.
Excellent. We've got a victory and a victim. Thank you very much for sharing that, Nelson.
Welcome.
So I just want to reflect on some of the things Jonathan was talking about. in the world of Mac OS, we have tech integrated development environments. The one that I use with frequency is TechShop, but there are others. TechShop provides access to the tech engine, of course, and it also provides a tech editor and a tech previewer that works on PDF. So I wanted to talk about the tech editor in TechShop and the possibility of an external editor that also integrates with TechShop, as IDEs tend to allow external editors to act on a kind of first-class basis within the integrated development environment. So TechShop's tech editor has context coloring, and I'm prepared to show on the shared screen a visual example of that if one is wanted. It also has sort of tech-savvy editing tools that, for instance, allow you to see things like balanced braces, balanced delimiters of all kinds, and so on. I use, by preference, a Mac OS text editor called BBEdit, which is a favorite among computer programmers on the Mac. And it has these same features that, and I think they're even more powerful than TechShop's. But that's by way of saying that there is such a thing as a tool on a platform like Mac OS that is actually tech savvy. BBEdit is savvy for all sorts of computer programming languages, and one of them is tech. And that's like saying it has some sort of checking built into it. Now, Jonathan also mentioned word count and the like. Both BBEdit and TechShop's editors have word count built in. So that sort of convenience is present. And I'm sure that on other platforms, there are such things available as well. It's just that I'm not as familiar with them on a day-to-day work basis. So in terms of development tools, that's what's available that I'm aware of. And by the way, that's just the way things stand today. Historically, there have been plenty of tools, and the fact that we don't use them today is perhaps just the way history evolves. But I'm sure that they're present on Windows, and I rather think they're present on Unix, although other people know more about the sort of pure Unix environment than I do, like, for instance, Nelson probably does. I have worked in that environment. I used Tico, and you know, those tools did not have the sorts of nice features that our modern tools have, the ones I'm used to. So those are my reflections on what Jonathan said, at least in part.
A little history anecdote here. I recall hearing some years ago that perhaps it was an interview with Don Knuth, and he was asked what kind of IDE, interactive development environment he used. And he said, I don't use one. I use Unix, and I use Emacs, and I use TeX. And that was all he really needed. And I know there's a tendency for many languages, especially complicated ones with large libraries like Java and Rust and others, to have these IDEs. And yet, what I've always told students, look, as long as you use computers, which for most of you will be all of your lives, it makes sense to learn an editor that's available on every single platform you're ever likely to use. And then your fingers will do the right thing no matter where you are, and you won't have to think about it. And so I've always rejected the notion that I have to use a separate editor for a particular language, whether it's TeX or Java or something like that. And I stick with an editor that I have everywhere, namely Emacs. Now, Emacs is large, it's complicated, but it is really no harder to learn than any other editor. It has pull-down menus and pop-up help and extensive history mechanisms and the ability to invoke external programs. And most importantly, the ability to write your own code to do editing tasks that you need that perhaps no one else in the world does. And so over the last really more than 40 years now, I have developed a very large suite of tens of thousands of lines of Emacs support code. And it's at my fingertips in every single platform that I work on. And so I don't need any of the IDEs. The other tool that I use extensively, of course, is Unix Make, because it allows you to write down the rules for turning one file or set of files into another file and forget it. And after that, you just type make or make in a target name. Because I find especially in the IDE environments, I watch students doing theses on their laptops with TechShop. And they pull down the menu to run BibTeX, and they pull down another menu to run LaTeX, and they pull down another menu to do the previewing. And I say, why don't you just put those things you're doing routinely in a make file and type the word make, on subsequent invocations, it's up arrow carriage return. So it's 2 keystrokes, and it will do all of those steps again repeatedly and in the correct order. You won't have forgotten to run BibTeX because you added a new reference. It just seems to me to be a wrong-headed approach to using computer software, and yet it's clear that a large portion of humanity works that way. It just, me, is a reflection that they don't know enough about computers to realize that there are better ways of doing things, and it really is worth learning those better ways.
Yeah, I agree. I like what you've said, Nelson, and Emacs. I graduated from TCO to Emacs, so yeah, and my fingers still work the same way in Emacs as they did before. But and it's powerful. Emacs is an execution shell, has power. But just a little note I put into the chat, in TechShop, you get to use a make-like tool written in Python by one of the contributors to TechShop, whose name I didn't recall right off the bat. I use a tool called PDF LaTeX MK, and it manages my requirements to use make index and BibTeX and so on. And it's not Unix make, but it works in that way.
Yeah, there's another tool which is in TechLive for the last 4 or 5 years called Arara, A-R-A-R-A, developed by some of our tech friends in Brazil that we had the pleasure of meeting at the Rio conference. And I've actually included instructions in our thesis preparation for how to use that. You essentially embed comments in your TeX file, and instead of saying LaTeX file name, you say Arara file name. It reads those comments and does things. It's not the same as make because it has no dependency checking. You will simply do the steps in the right order, but at least it guarantees that none of the steps have been missed.
Yeah, so that
Okay.
tends to convert the like command line environment into something more useful, more user friendly. Uh, so I sympathize with your students. If they're still using TechShop and pulling the tools down individually, they need to read the fine manual.
I'd like to say a few words about, I'll use the word marketplace, but I'm going to use a different word as well, which is agora, which is a Greek word. It's an ancient Greek word. It's the central public place in ancient Greek city-states. It's where the people met. The literal meaning is a gathering place or assembly. It later acquired the name of a marketplace because when the people weren't gathering, it was also a convenient place to hold a market. So in at least in Freiburg, because I've been there, there's a market next to the cathedral, big square next to the cathedral. And that square is used as a marketplace, but it can also be used as a gathering place for example, public ceremonies or anything else like that. I've been to Florence, and there's a big square outside what is now the city hall, but it was then where the city council met. And Florence at that time was a city-state, just as the Greeks were city-states. So there were many city-states in Italy. And that's where Michelangelo's David was for several centuries. And it can function as a marketplace, but it can also function as a public gathering place. So it's, for example, where, I get the name wrong, Savonarola, the reforming monk, there was a sort of bonfire of the vanities took place there. And a number of years later, I think he was burnt at the stake there. So a place where public events take place is, if you like, what a marketplace is, what an agora is. We can use agora as a place where public events take place. I believe in the United States, a shopping mall can be counted as a public place in terms of political activity. I'm not sure about that. So now let's go back. Tech Live is a sort of public space for the tech community. It's where we share things. It's where we publish things. It's a distribution of software to all of us. And during our conversation, I had the realization that LaTeX provided a framework in which people could write tech macros, style files, if you will, and distribute them. So LaTeX provided a sort of, I use the word agora, for the tech community for writing style files. And in this tech hour, to a certain extent, we've discussed the needs of the tech community and how those needs might fit in with Tech Live. And we can think of Tech Live as a software distribution, or as a DVD, or as a social organism, or a social knowledge and a shared experience. And it's that social knowledge, shared experience side that is in some sense the valuable part.
One of the aspects of LaTeX that's really significant is because it provides this framework for creating the implementation of a package or a document class. There's an aspect of the world of LaTeX that has to do with interoperability, and there's actually a sort of gatekeeper for that. It's quite possible to create a LaTeX package that is not particularly interoperable with other LaTeX packages, it's possible to require particular package loading requirements in order for a package to be compatible, like hyperref. You have to load it last, but then if you're using the glossaries package, you have to load that after hyperref. That this sort of consideration all has to do with interoperability. And parenthetically, RevTech has kind of struggled with interoperability with LaTeX and its many available packages, because not all LaTeX packages are compatible with RevTech, and authors who try to use RevTech document class will tell us when they've made such a discovery. So the notion of particular packages being within the fold, within the pale, as it were, is significant in the world of LaTeX.